RIN TV coverage of the 2015 Joint Industry Forum is brought to you by PCS, a unit of Verisk Analytics. Fraud continues to plague the insurance industry. For an update on progress in fraud prevention and prosecution, we spoke with Roger Morris from the National Insurance Crime Bureau. Here he discusses workers' comp fraud, cybercrime, auto theft, and medical fraud.
What are the issues with workers' comp fraud and how do we address them? Well, the main issue is malingering. A lot of what we consider fraud in the work comp arena involves around individuals that perhaps take advantage of the system. And it's very difficult to identify this, necessarily prosecute it, but what you need is a good work-based system within the companies to take a look at individuals that are on workers' comp, make sure they're not taking advantage of the system. Are they going back to work under a restricted program? Are they taking advantage of opportunities to get back to work, or are they blatantly taking advantage of the system? We know it's a problem. It's a very difficult problem. It's not the kind of organized criminal problem that we normally deal with, but it's a major cost factor in the United States. Well, on the issue of cybercrime and identity theft and what companies should be doing to mitigate it, it is a huge problem. Our member companies are very concerned about it. We just surveyed them on some issues related to that, whether we should be more involved in the issue of cybercrime, and it was kind of a resounding yes, it's probably a good idea that we get more involved in it. Of course, cybercrime, the big area of concern in the insurance industry is largely identity theft. When you're in the underwriting process or the claims process, we want to make sure that people verify information and not just accept it and over the phone in particular for a claim or a underwriting process. You want to make sure that you know who you're dealing with and that they're not using a phony ID. So checking it with public records, making sure that the numbers match up, the addresses match up, that's the first step. And then obviously all the companies are very concerned about cybercrime and its potential impact on them. We've seen what's happened with the retailers getting hit by it, and the insurance companies are spending a lot of time and effort, particularly within their IT departments, to try and put a lid on this. It's a very difficult problem. Everybody knows that. Hackers are out there. Cybercrime is a real issue, but we are very much involved in working with law enforcement, federal authorities, and trying to attack this head on. But as you know, it's an ongoing concern. What are the factors involving vehicle theft and the issue of telemetrics? Well, the vehicle theft continues a downward trend. That's the good news. And we've seen the latest figures that came out for 2013. Thefts in the United States fell below 700,000 for the first time in many, many years. And that's a good sign. I mean, we've got more cars on the road, we've got a larger population, a lot of 2- and 3-family cars, car families, but people are seeing much less theft. That is in part largely due to technology. A lot of the thefts we're seeing today are not your traditional thefts. They're financial fraud. They're financial schemes where somebody is leasing a car, makes one payment, skips out on 3 or 4 payments because they've already taken that car and shipped it in a container overseas to a foreign buyer where they're going to get 2 or 3 times the money they get in the US for it. That's a big issue. Spin switching, cloning, all that stuff is going on. It's very sophisticated. Sometimes it's very difficult to get law enforcement to understand it and look into it because it is a complicated financial scheme. They don't see it as traditional theft. So we're working very closely with the rental companies, the lenders, the major car lenders across the country, the major manufacturers, all of them trying to put some more strength into this as to making this a crime that people are more aware of and to help put an end to it. The latest trends in cargo theft and how do you win the war? Well, cargo theft obviously has taken up a significant amount of our attention these days. Why steal from a bank, rob it, and risk 30 years in prison for $10,000 when you can go out and steal a load of cargo worth $1 million and have very little chance of getting caught and make a nice profit on it. That's what many of the old traditional hardcore thieves are doing these days. They've emerged from car theft into cargo theft. And we are working very closely with transporters, with insurance companies, our insurance members that do insure a lot of these transportation companies, and trying to make sure that they realize the importance of, one, timely reporting of any problems, training, so make sure that they don't have drivers out there leaving trucks unattended at truck stops, making sure loads are secured and tracked. And the biggest thing right now is getting them reported, getting them into the system so that we are on the lookout for them before they disappear. When somebody steals a truckload of cargo and they take it off for a while, make sure it's cooled off, nobody's looking for it, then they start stripping it out and selling it, it's on the internet or on some site up for sale on the black market before you know what hit you. And that can be a very expensive proposition. One of the biggest concerns we have today for our member companies is medical fraud, and it's tied to the medical component of the auto insurance policy. People are really taking advantage of this through staged accidents and using runners and cappers to recruit victims, alleged victims of staged accidents, take them to certain clinics where they can start a billing process and start billing insurance companies. And this is particularly happening in no-fault states like Florida, New York, Michigan. These are states where it's basically a blank check to write fraud. We are fighting this heavily. It's one of our major impacts. We've set up medical fraud task forces around the country and working very closely with law enforcement, with the state insurance departments and fraud bureaus to try and really focus in on these folks because they're very sophisticated. They'll use chiropractors, doctors, lawyers, and many of these are run by well-organized gangs. And they are very sophisticated in how they do things, and they will open a clinic, start billing, and when they get the first hint of some suspicious activity that they may be uncovered, they'll close it up and move on, and they may have billed millions of dollars by that time. And of course the insurance companies are having to pay these on a timely basis under the state regulations. By the time they find out there's fraud going on, it's pay and chase. We're trying to avert that now, make it the other way where we're chasing them before we pay them. But it's a very difficult task.
For more of our coverage of the 2015 Joint Industry Forum, visit the RIN TV On Demand Library.